Keith McGowan here, the Outboard Dad, here to help you have a better boating experience. Today we're going to continue on with our Mercury and get some of the accessories installed on it. I also want to talk about my used outboard motor buying guide, soon to be on Amazon, updated with more content. If you send me an email after purchase with a proof of purchase to keith@outboarddad.com, I will give you a free session over the phone to help you with a motor or a boat you're buying. So if you remember, we got the block hooked up. We got all of our nuts and washers put on there now, all nice and tightened down. So now our block is secure. We're ready to just basically dress this block, is usually the way it's put. We're gonna get some electronics, but we have some nuts and bolts. We have some rubber grommets for the side panels, but we wanna get everything we can installed on this before we put our side panels on. We'll probably even fire it up before we put those side panels on because it'll make it a little easier to work on. So what I like to do is I like to, go around to the stuff that I have in the shop and clean up a little bit. Ooh, Ficht RAM, that's coming in a future video. What we're gonna do with that, God only knows, because I know how much my YouTube followers love the Ficht RAM engine. So, as you know, when I do my projects, if you've watched any of mine, I like to put in tubs all my parts so they get smaller and smaller the more stuff goes together. So today we're just going to take first our throttle and shifter linkage and we'll hook that up, make sure that gets hooked in there correctly. And then we'll start looking at some of the other stuff we have here and looking at our electronics to get that mounted. And we're also going to double check our hose routing. I have a little diagram that I printed out, so we're going to make sure that's all correct too. So stay tuned. It's important that we take a close look at our shift linkage before we just go mounting things up to make sure they go on in the right sequence. So as we can see, we have one, just drop the piece to make sure we pick it up. So if you look closely, we have 1, 2, 3 bolt holes where our bracket goes in. So we know this is going to go in place here, right? Because that's where we took it off from. Now, that's another good key to have a video because I can go back to the video to see. But there's also a washer, there's a little plate here, and there's another little piece of plastic with a thingy, and this thing, and how did this all go together, right? So you can easily watch the video, but also we can look at these things and determine how this went. So this piece here has like a notch on it, or a cam. It's not really a cam, but it has a piece on it that as we go through here, we see as it slides, it's gonna open and close this switch, right, to make sure we're in neutral. So we know that goes on there. Now, I also know that the washer goes on here on the top, not on the bottom. So what we want to do first is put this on. There's a spring here on our shift lever. So we're going to go ahead and slide this in place. We're going to drop that piece. And of course, it's going to go underneath things. So we have to shut off our video for a minute to find the piece that Keith just dropped. So after dropping the piece and trying to hold on to everything in my hands at one time and dropping another one, maybe I should put some stuff down. So put that piece down, we'll put the top piece down, we'll put the washer down, and then let's just look at this. So it wouldn't go on that way very easily. So how about we just put this in place first? We know we go this way. We know this has to go out, right, to hit that switch. So we'll go ahead and put this in this orientation. And we'll get this on here first, then we'll slip our piece in and get that in place. Now I think we can put at least 1 or 2 bolts in here. Right now we know we can slide back and forth, and we have a top piece that slides. We'll put that on. And then we have the piece that locks into our shift lever, or our shift cable. Now this has got a spring on the bottom of it, so I'm going to push that spring up. And it has a keyway on it so that it can lock into place. And then we're going to take our washer, put it on top, and then we're going to get the nut that goes on there and put the nut on there. So once we get that small nut in place that goes on top of this, you can see I put it in there. We can get it tightened down. If you look closely, there's a little tab here, a little pin that the cable will go on. And then this will slide over and lock in place. So we're going to tighten it down, but we're not going to tighten it down too much. Now we can go ahead and finish tightening up the bracket bolts. I did have to slide it all the way up into gear, or what would be in gear, so that I could get the last bolt in place. So we're just going to crank all these down, then this will be set to go, and then we'll move on to what the next parts are that we want to put together. Now that we have our shifter in place, we make sure we can shift it back and forth. We don't have a lower unit hooked up yet. We're gonna probably do that next. And we make sure that we can move our throttle linkage and everything moves the way it's supposed to. Right, so we make sure it's all free, ready to go. And I think next we'll hook up our battery to our power tilt and trim and tilt this up, and then we'll go ahead and get the lower unit on. But first we gotta put a water pump in it. Now we'll get that lower unit in the vise. We already checked the fluid. We know the fluid was good. We'll get that impeller, water pump impeller replaced, and then we'll get that in place. So Quicksilver water pump. I do like to use OEM. You don't have to. Plenty of guys use Sierra parts and don't have problems, or they're familiar with other parts. Certainly up to you what you choose to do. If I'm going to sell a motor, I'm putting all OEM parts in it, just to have it, and I think a good practice to get into. Now, if it's your own boat and it's your own motor and you decide, hey, I don't really need that, I don't need to spend the extra money for that, I'm gonna get this and I'm gonna replace it every 2 years, that's fine. Most marinas will tell you that you should replace your water pump every 2 years anyway. Now that's a general rule, and of course they make money every time you bring it in to do that. And of course when you do that, you're also lubricating your bolts and everything, and you get to inspect everything and find other issues. It's not a bad thing to do. But I've run my motors for 4 years without replacing a water pump. Depends on how much usage I get out of it. And I've pulled them apart after that 4 years and to replace them, and there's really nothing wrong with them. So it's entirely up to you. It's your boat, it's your decision, but that's kind of the rules that we go with. Go ahead and take the rest of these bolts off. They're already loose, not loose enough for me to get it with my fingers. I didn't want them to fall off of there when I was moving things around. So we'll get these in, or get these out. Now we had pulled the old water pump out. Didn't look too bad. I'm not sure how old it was. So it's definitely a little hard, you know, so it's probably got some age to it and still has a curl to it. So always a good idea to replace. If you remember also when we pulled our exhaust section out and the tube that goes up for our water feed, we had this that was stuck up inside there. So it just gives it kind of a guide to guide into place, and there's a rubber grommet in the bottom here. So we'll make sure we maintain that so that goes together nicely. There is a rubber ring here that goes on first. Sometimes with greasy fingers, it's hard to get it to start. It is kind of a tight fit on there, it should be. And we'll slide that up. This motor's in good shape. This shaft is nice and clean. I've pulled motors apart before where there's rust all over the shaft and everything, but this is pretty nice shape. Make sure we save all the washers. So I guess we didn't pull that water pump up because there's still one in here. So that must have been from the other Mercury. That was probably from the Optimax that we worked on. Let's see. So yeah, it still has a little curl to it. This one's much more flexible. So this one's probably not that old. But again, we'll go ahead. It's pretty interesting how Mercury used the same exact water pump for many, many different models. So we do have our keyway that stayed on there nicely. So what I like to do is slide the new one over and get it on that keyway first. The gasket on top here is in great condition. No reason for us to replace it. I could probably lift it up and put a little sealer under it if I wanted to. I may do that, put a little bit of our weather stripping adhesive that I like to use. So let's go ahead and do that before we put our new impeller in place. Of course, next time this needs to get done, since we put sealer on it, it'll probably break the gasket. But I like to have the optimal amount of water pressure going up to my engine as possible. So with our keyway, once I have the gasket in place, I'm going to put a little sealer on the bottom. I'll put a little sealer on the bottom of the water pump housing. Put a little bit of grease on the keyway. This way it kind of stays in place while we're playing around with it. It doesn't drop down inside the lower unit. Not that I've ever done that before. So again, I'm not going crazy with this. Just going to get a nice thin layer of this on there. So the keyway is there. So you can see the keyway on the inside of the water pump. So I like to grab that keyway by this, you know, kind of lined up with my fingers here. This way, I'm kind of lined up with the keyway so that I can get it in place. Drops right in. Now, if you've seen any of my water pump videos before, I take a little bit of WD-40 and just put it on the points. I don't like to use grease on rubber because it can eat away at rubber. Put a very little thin layer on the inside of the cup. And now we'll slide this over and we'll see how greasy this shaft is if we can turn it clockwise. And it goes into place. Sometimes take a rag to get it the rest of the way. And there it's down nice and easy. Then we have our rubber grommet that slips over right in place. First thing I'll do is tighten up the 5/16, and then we'll get the rest of these nuts on here and tighten this down. After I'm done tightening it down, I don't want to crank it down. It's only plastic housing with a metal casing inside of it. So what I'll do is I'll just get it snugged up, and then I want to turn my shaft to make sure I'm not binding up inside there. Now we got all the bolts tightened down, nice and snug. We'll grab it and spin it, make sure it moves freely, and it does. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to get some grease. We're going to put it on the threads here for the nuts that have to go on this. I might even take a little wire brush. It doesn't look bad at all. A little stained, but the threads look pretty good. Then I'll put some grease on the shift shaft, and of course on the spline on the top too, where it goes into the motor. Right now we are in neutral. We have our linkage that we just connected for our shift linkage in neutral because we just mounted that onto the motor. And we'll slide this up on there, get a couple nuts on it, and we'll get it tightened down. I have my ratchet strap set up here so that when I get this up in place, I can hook it under here. And this way I'm not holding it with my back because my back is aged. Let's not give it any numbers. All right, guys? So I want to make sure that I line up my water tube and my shift shaft, right? So those are the items that need to be lined up when I go in there. And obviously my drive shaft has to make it up into the flywheel properly. But I can get it up in here close enough and have my ratchet hold it, and then I can go up and spin the flywheel a little bit to make that spline line up. We got everything greased up, and now it's just a little bit of muscle to get it in there. And it's a good thing it's only a little bit because I only have a little bit of muscle. I will say though, I have a little bit more flexibility because of Master Nick. Master Nick's Karate, North Brunswick, great place to go. I've been going there for almost a year now. So give me a little more agility, a little more stretch, and some really good technique too. Okay, now we got it close enough. I'm gonna spin the flywheel a little bit. Once we get a little bit of tension on our strap and we spin the flywheel, then you can feel it go up the rest of the way. You can actually push it up the rest of the way, but we're just gonna get some bolts, some nuts in place and tighten this down. Now we have a new water pump. I ordered a set of thermostats. They should be coming tomorrow, the next day. We'll get the rest of the electronics on this motor, and we're gonna get some fuel in there. We're gonna fire this up and see how she runs. I'm hoping it smokes like crazy because I wanna burn off all that oil that we used, that builder's lube that I mixed up. Then this will be up for sale. We already checked out the pellet and tilt and trim. That's all in good shape. Once this is put back together, actually the paint doesn't look too bad on this motor. It looks pretty good. Maybe we'll just clean it up and see what it looks like. I know the hood is very faded, so I know it would probably sell faster if it had a nice painted hood, but I'm not sure that that's the route we're gonna take with this one. So we'll have this ready to run very soon. I can't wait to turn the key. We're going to continue on with the electronics in our next episode, get all the coil packs, the power packs, everything mounted on the motor and wired up, double check all of our hoses, make sure we're ready to go, and then it'll be ready to put the cowlings on, but I think we'll fire it up before we get to that point, and we'll see how this motor runs. So stay tuned for the next episode. Please like, subscribe, send me any comments that you have, and remember, I am the Outboard Dad, and I'm here to help you have a better boating experience. So reach out, Keith@outboarddad.com. Used Outboard Motor Guide coming soon, updated version on Amazon, and hope you have a great experience out on the water. Have a great day.